The Wicker Man is one of my favorite films. It features a rich world, fun plot, and plenty of fascinating elements to talk about. But for this episode, I want to draw your attention to a single frame. This shot could be the most important shot in the film. This shot changes everything, because this is the shot when the Wicker Man flips genres. I'm going to presume that since you have joined me tonight in my remote cabin, that you've already seen the film. I'm going to presume that you are familiar enough that when I make statements like, The Wicker Man is a quasi-musical film, you'll be able to nod along in agreement because it's true and you've seen the truth. Also, spoilers from here on out. Now, I want to drop us into the penultimate sequence of this film, when Sergeant Howie finds Rowan Morrison. Now, thankfully, you've already seen this film, so you know that Sergeant Howie has come here in search of Rowan Morrison, a girl who has gone missing. You have already followed Sergeant Howie as he conducted his investigation, following Rowan's trail deeper and deeper into the heart of a backwards paganist village. You have watched the puritanical Sergeant Howie wrestle with temptation, with disgust, and a little more temptation as he tries to find Rowan Morrison, who he fears has been sacrificed to pagan gods. As we neared the climax of the film, Sergeant Howie discovered that Rowan Morrison is still alive, but is about to be sacrificed. Sergeant Howie assaulted Mr. McGregor, the innkeeper and landlord, and stole his punch costume so that Sergeant Howie can sneak into the sacrificial ritual. Now, up until this point, the entire movie has functioned like a crime mystery film. It has all the beats: the missing child, the tight-knit community, the investigating officer, and sure, the movie does step outside of its genre. It offers a lot of diegetic folk music numbers, and the happy paganist village is an unusual setting for a film of this type, but ultimately, the whole film operates like a crime mystery film. It has a similar flavor to other mystery films of the time, such as Bunny Lake is Missing, which came out only 7 years prior. That's a movie I would recommend, by the by. All of the plot beats in The Wicker Man so far have felt expected for the audience of the time. So when we get to the ceremony, what we expect as a viewer is to see Sergeant Howie make his move. He's got to do something before Rowan Morrison is sacrificed. Therefore, saving the day and returning home to his Puritan life and his girlfriend or fiancé or sister or whoever this is. But there's a change coming to the story, and it begins with this penultimate sequence.
And now, for our more dreadful sacrifice.
Sergeant Howie has danced along with the ritual ceremony in order to find Rowan Morrison, and in this moment, he finds her. The community watches Punch run up the path. Sergeant Howie finally reaches the girl, and when he slugs her guard, something really strange happens. Music begins to play, and not just any music. Now, The Wicker Man is a quasi-musical film. In other words, it is full of diegetic music numbers, most of which are rock folk songs with a little bit of old European pagan lyricism thrown in for good measure.
And on that bed there was a girl, and on that girl there was a man.
My hand on her belly.
No one but me, my dear.
Landlord's daughter.
I'd like my supper now, please.
Nearly the entire soundtrack is folk music. There is one notable exception, though. When Sergeant Howie throws a punch at Rowan Morrison's captor, new music begins playing. Here's a small sample of the song. And that's all I can play for you. The Sentinels are listening. The chase scene music cue in this sequence is unlike any other cue that has come before in this movie. Instead of folk rock music, we hear a groovy made-for-TV style track that is reminiscent of the police drama stories of the time. It could have just as easily come from Dirty Harry or Starsky and Hutch. You may be wondering to yourself, why is this cue here? Why wouldn't they just include another folk song in order to match the rest of the aesthetic of this film? Now, the reason is simple. The music is telling us that for the first time in the film, Sergeant Howie feels as if he is in control. And for the first time, we, the audience, may start to believe him. So as we follow Sergeant Howie and Rowan Morrison during their escape through the cave, we are seeing what we believe to be the climax of the film unfold. The music is blasting. The tensions are high. They are making their getaway. An audience member watching this film for the first time in the 70s has been programmed through years of watching police movies to believe that maybe the music is telling the truth. Maybe they will escape after all. But then the music stops.
I seem to have lost our torch-bearing friends.
I'm sorry. It was worse than I remembered it.
What unfolds afterwards is a musicless explanation of the truth. Without a backing cue here, we are being told that Sergeant Howie has returned to reality again. Lord Summerisle and his two accomplices explain that Rowan Morrison is not the one they want to sacrifice. Instead, Sergeant Howie, who is a man of authority, a virgin, and a fool, has been duped to believe that Rowan Morrison was missing. He was led around like a beetle on a string, drawing himself tighter and tighter to the nail at the center. And then it happens.
Get out of my way.
There it is. The shot. The entire film is exploring several dualities, including Christianity and paganism, law and lawlessness, or the moral and the immoral. But it is also exploring another duality, reality and act. As we've just learned from Lord Summerisle, the entire community has been putting on a play for Sergeant Howie. They have been manipulating him by providing him with a textbook paganist production, and I mean literally textbook paganism. There is a paganist textbook in the library detailing the exact costumes that the community would be wearing and what their ritual activities would be, suggesting that perhaps the community was following this textbook themselves. Everywhere he turned, Sergeant Howie was faced with what he understood to be paganism, because for Sergeant Howie, paganism looks like this, when in reality, it looks more like this. In other words, the people of Summerisle used Sergeant Howie's puritanical biases to lead him toward his death. The community has put on a flamboyant mask. And when we get to this shot, we finally see that mask being taken away. The genre of the film flips. The crime drama format of the story being exchanged for that of a contemplative, psychological horror ending. And this shot is key to this transition. The mask comes off. The act is over. This is real. This is who they are. Now, you may be wondering how I came to the conclusion that the community is putting on a play for Sergeant Howie. If you watch the film, you may figure that the community is just being itself when they don the silly, colorful costumes and prance around like happy paganists. Well, the concept of putting on a play for the investigating cop actually comes from the book. And just a heads up, I'm about to spoil the book.
And who but a fool would do that?
In Ritual by David Pinner, the backwards village that the police officer has come to investigate is indeed paganist. The village people live very twisted lives following paganist ideas, dabbling in illicitly free love, as well as the dark arts. However, the village community looks the same as everyone else. They could be anyone else, living their small lives in their small rural town. It is when the police detective pressures them that they put on a show for him. With the help of their resident actor, they put together the ritual ceremony that the investigator has been looking for. And at the same time, they frame him for murder. Now, when you get to this shot of the film and you see them taking off their masks, you as the audience realize that the community is not what it seems. They are paganists, yes, but they are paganists with naked faces, a small village of backwards people. When they wore the masks and the costumes, they did so because that is what Sergeant Howie wanted to find. At the end, we see what real paganism looks like. No masks, no costumes, no makeup, just honest-to-God murder. And singing, which I mean, nobody's surprised about that. As an aspiring novelist, I think my biggest takeaway from the film is the symbol of the mask, which is a conversation that gets real meta when we talk about genre. Because this film wears its genre as a mask. Most of the movie portrays itself in a way that is familiar to the audience, so that even the strange twists and turns feel expected in a crime film. It's a weird and off-putting little plot, but it's expected. Only when the mask is removed and the story takes off its crime drama facade do we see the story for what it is. It's a horror film based on religious bias and community identities. The audience, just like Sergeant Howie, is duped by the penultimate ceremony, which played us to the very end. This is a masterful feat of storytelling, and one that I would like to emulate. And I'm not the only one who took this lesson to heart. You can see the Wicker Man's influence all over the place, but it's most obviously seen in some of Edgar Wright's early work. His film Hot Fuzz is directly inspired by the Wicker Man and also features Edward Woodward, who is now a member of the backward rural community instead of the investigating cop. Hot Fuzz attempts to achieve what the Wicker Man did so well, which is what I've been calling a genre flip. We go from small-town police procedural to a slasher, to a psychological horror, to an outright action film, all the while maintaining a really funny comedy through line. Edgar Wright does this again, and I would probably add does it better, with The World's End. Instead of flipping the genre over and over, this movie only has a single major genre flip. I'm of course referring to the bathroom scene. We go from a get the band back together boozer film to that of a sci-fi thriller in the vein of Invasion of the Pod People, just with more martial arts. And beer, of course, plenty of beer. I love these kinds of films, the kinds that play with expectations and achieve a meaningful subversion of the rules of a genre. I think in a small way, stories that mess with our expectations are actually rather valuable. You see, as a culture, we tell ourselves the same stories over and over again, following the same genre formats. And every now and again, it is important to have a story that challenges our expectations, because it reminds us of our personal biases when it comes to genre and storytelling. And it shows us that maybe the things we want out of a story is not necessarily good for art. It is just good for us. That's all for now. Good night. And remember, it doesn't matter who you are or who you meet. Everybody is wearing a mask.